Hello and welcome back to Lights Camera Podcast, the podcast where we discuss and analyse different movies. And in today's episode, we are going to be doing something a bit different. We're going to have a look back at this last decade and talk about what different movies we liked this decade, what were our favourite movies from each year, 2010 to 19, and our reasons for liking those movies in particular. But before we get to that, let's just chat about this decade in general. What a decade it's been.
Yeah, it's very strange because I think most of our more serious education has happened from 2010 to 2019 or 20, and this year obviously we end our formal education.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty crazy to think that whole decade encapsulates everything. But your whole, I guess, teens and your early adulthood is in that decade.
Exactly.
And this next decade is kind of the beginning of a new chapter, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like from now till 2030 at least, it's kind of now we are entering into the career stage of our lives.
Yeah.
Whereas this, 2010 to 2019 or 2020, it's been more kind of the building phase to get to that stage, because obviously in medicine there's so much investment into like the final thing. You see everyone around you getting jobs, you see everyone else getting into universities or getting university offers and all this type of thing. So it's a lot of that time of, I think, it's that investment period, into your GCSEs, into your A-levels, that really over like a long period of time. Yeah.
So now we're basically reaching, hopefully, the payoff. And
imagine if it's so underwhelming.
Just that 6 years gone to waste. No, hopefully not. But we'll be positive for 2020 and the future. That's actually something I was thinking about. For us, like I said, our teens and early adulthood came from 2010 onwards. What would you say is one piece of advice you could, if you wanted to give to the next, because we were, 13, 14 in 2010, what would be a piece of advice you'd give to a 13 or 14-year-old now? I don't know if they watch our videos, our podcasts.
Yeah.
If you do, thank you.
Yeah, if you do, very intellectual.
But yeah, just in general, what advice would you give to a teenager now?
That's a hard question. It's a hard question. I would say my best advice would be invest in your childhood. That's like when you're young, that is the time to really use your time. And whenever you're young, people just don't realize how much time they have. That is the time,
Absolutely.
There were so many more things I could have pursued properly. I played an instrument, for 6 years, and I could have continued that. I would have been much better now. There's other things, sports, gym, loads and loads of things which I could have done better with my time. Reading, obviously most of it went on study, but I would say really do invest your time, use that time, because you never get it again, basically. Yeah, what about yourself?
Yeah. No, I completely agree, firstly. And I think reading and languages are the two things that I really regret not spending more time on when I was younger.
Yeah.
When I had so much free time. And it's just, from here, it's just going to get more busy. Like, we're always at the least busy point, one day to the next.
Exactly, yeah.
I think for me, it would probably be, there's, I think, two things mainly. I think firstly, find out what are the things, try everything. So any opportunity you have to do something, try it and find out what it is that you enjoy, and find out what it is that you're good at, and try and find something that meets both of those criteria and see if that's something you can see yourself doing and pursuing for the rest of your life, because those early years are quite crucial in trying to find out those things, especially when you have all that free time. And I think the second thing is, are there things that you're doing that could potentially lead to really bad habits that you don't want to be doing, and try to form good habits instead, because those are your brain is so malleable in those at that age that the things you start to do start to have an effect.
Yeah.
So consider those things.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice.
An old man like me, and that's the thing. Like the world that teenagers are going into now is so different to the world that we grew up in.
Yeah,
that it's difficult. Maybe these things don't really apply that well.
Yeah, it is tricky. I mean, because I've got a younger sister, you've got a younger brother. My younger sister is only 15. And it's hard to tell sometimes exactly, and it's very clearly very different, but it's hard to tell again because being teenager, sometimes a bit secretive. You don't know exactly full life and all this type of thing, like what's on people's minds, what is as a teenager. But yeah, I think those things still hold true. I think some things through human nature, even with our parents would have gone through, they fundamentally don't change. And I think that's one of them. I think, you can find a way of modifying that to the present day.
Yeah.
One thing I'd ask for you as well is, what would you say was the moment that sticks out for you from 2010 to 2019? Is there your best moment, or so to speak?
Best moment. I don't know if it's best moment's difficult, because I think I guess you remember the best and the worst. I think most memorable was almost, because we were talking about the most significant. I think in terms of that, it was probably be getting into medicine, because that was all of your education up to that point was leading to that. Your GCSEs, your A levels. That was always the end goal for me, at least. And so finally achieving that, it was like, it's where we're at now. It's the start of the next chapter.
Yeah.
So that is we're kind of at that same thing where, okay, fine. It was all about getting into med school. Now it's about going into and becoming a doctor and into the working world.
Yeah.
So I'd say getting into medicine.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Your goal is, as when you're working so much, I think it was you who said this, the goal was never to be a doctor, it was to get into medicine.
Yeah.
And it's now realizing it's true, because now we're here, it feels so unreal, like that we are about to be a doctor, because your goal was always to do medicine and then do well in medicine as you go through it. So yeah, it's strange, but no, I think that's really true. I think going through medicine, you learn a lot, it changes you as a person. I think have to be careful not to get too involved, but I think it's definitely it's a life-changing experience, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's one that we won't forget, I think, and it's a lifelong commitment, really.
Yeah.
That's the intention anyway, going into it, which is a difficult decision to make at the ripe young age of about 18 or whenever you decided to do it. That this is really the commitment you're going to make for the rest of your life. And you just hope that it was the right decision to make.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but we'll see. Anyway, to the
matter at hand.
Yes, the matter movies. That's enough about life. So we're going to be, as I said, going through the movies from 2010 to 2019. What was our favorite movie from each year? I've also done a few honorable mentions.
Yes.
And just a bit about the year in terms of movies and how I felt about the year.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Yeah, I've done a bit on that as well, and we can see what we think. You start off.
All right. So for 2010, my movie of the year was Inception.
Okay.
I think there's certain movies that you see where the experience you never forget of seeing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, I remember this so vividly, like going to Blockbuster, RIP Blockbuster, going and renting Inception, and then coming home and then watching it, and then I never forget. That's like a memory that's burnt in my mind. Just 'cause the movie was, it was for me. It was one of those things that it changes your perception of what a movie can do and what it can be.
Yeah.
And for me, I was just enthralled throughout this movie. Just every step along the way, I was hooked. And it just, for me, it was an introduction to, well, it was an introduction to Christopher Nolan, but it was one that stood out to me as something very, very different to anything I've seen before.
Yeah, I think it was, in terms of its premise and story, it was probably the most novel that I've ever seen in a movie, especially, well, up to that point, especially.
Yeah.
I never encountered a movie like that before. I think when judging the movies, I don't know, maybe I saw it in a different way, in the sense that the way I think I saw it more in analysing it in compared to movies I've seen since then, or as a reflection back on the lasting power of that movie, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I first watched Inception, I was exactly like you, I was blown away by it. But I haven't put it at the top of my list, just because, having rewatched it recently, I don't know, I just felt like, I don't feel as blown away by it this time. I don't feel as moved by it this time.
Yeah.
Mainly because I felt like some of the characters I'm watching it the second time, I didn't feel that as close a bond with. So I don't know the name, not Leonardo DiCaprio, the other chap in it, I can't remember his name. He's like buddy, basically.
Yeah. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I think.
Yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I just didn't really feel that strong connection with him as a character. I didn't feel that invested in actually many of the characters, the girl especially. And that's something I realised on the rewatching of it. That I just don't think I felt as emotionally invested in it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's harsh because I'm judging it now backwards, if that makes sense. Rather, you just judge it on that first experience you had in 2010. What do you think of that?
That I can understand your point actually, and I do think the characters are probably not the highlight of the movie.
Yeah.
For me, it was more as you mentioned, the idea behind it, or conceptually, it was very innovative. And I think also visually, like there's so many movies that I think that have tried to replicate a lot of things that Inception did. So, for example, there was a big thing in Hollywood about using that foghorn in the trailers.
Oh,
like
yeah.
That came from Inception.
Oh,
So
really?
Yeah. Well, I think they're probably one of the early adopters or early users of it. But that changed, I guess, the way a lot of other people did things. And that's how I kind of looked at it, is what is the impact it had, not just on me, but I guess on the industry as well, or the potential impact it could have. And I think Inception was a game changer in a lot of ways, because it wasn't the first, but it was definitely a standout in terms of a clever blockbuster, an intelligent blockbuster, which usually when you think blockbuster, you don't really think of a clever and intelligent movie, but this is a standout example of one for me.
Yeah, no, I think from that analysis, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think perhaps I just for me it's just a balancing of between that idea, which is phenomenal, and having rewatched it, just feeling a bit the characters a bit flat.
Yeah. At the same time, I haven't seen it in a while, so
maybe you should rewatch it.
Yeah.
And see how you think about it.
Yeah.
For me, so for me it was a difficult choice, and this might surprise you. For me, it was a choice between Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Toy Story 3.
Was that? Yeah, that was 2010.
Yeah, it was the highest grossing movie of 2010.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so the reason why I didn't choose Inception, although it would be really high up there, maybe it should be number one, I don't know, but I felt like with Harry Potter, Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 1 was the one where it started incorporating the dark undertones of the series, of the franchise, came right to the fore. It felt the movie, in terms of its theme, in terms of its I don't even know how to describe it, the feeling, the aura of the movie was very dark, and I feel like not many movies, again, sometimes they can get a feeling or theme of a movie going very well. You know, like how a film might feel noir, or a film might feel like a Western film, or something like gritty, for example.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie did that very well. In addition, they had already built up those characters.
Yeah.
There was a strong connection with the characters. I thought that performances were really good. And it was just a lasting thing. And I remember, both of them, I've watched Deathly Hallows recently, and having watched that again, when I watched it, I felt it kind of transported me back to when I first watched it. I felt those same feelings, those same things, and for me that was a testament to how connected to the characters, how I felt, how this world was so vividly created. And I feel like Harry Potter is unparalleled, really, in creating a world which I think is undisputable in its realness, in terms of its tangibleness. It feels like something real. Those would be my reasons.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you mentioned about the tone. That's one thing, because I haven't seen it in a while, but the one thing I do remember is the darkness of it, how even just visually dark it is, not just as well as tonally. But I think for me, that was one of the films, and I think it's a thing that's kind of stopped with doing this part 1 and part 2. I haven't seen it in a while, and I feel like this was one of the early ones to do that. It was kind of just in the middle. And I feel like it was done just for the sake of kind of stretching those two movies out, because one thing I really remember was that first one had a lot of it just felt really drawn out to me. There was a lot of things that just didn't necessarily need to be in the movie, but it was there just to make time.
Okay.
That's, again, I haven't seen it in a while, so it might have been a younger me just not appreciating pauses in the movie. but that's what I remember.
No, I can understand that. I know that that is a criticism of the movie that there was at the time. But yeah, is there any other honorable mentions?
Oh yeah, I've got honorable mentions. So you mentioned Toy Story 3, which I actually recently saw like 2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did it feel underwhelming or?
No, I liked it less than I saw it when I saw it recently. It kind of made me like it more.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because what I realized with Toy Story 1 and 2 were aimed at children primarily, because then that was us as children, even people a bit older than us, because the first one came out the year I was born. Number 3 was, I felt like, a transitional one where it was both. I feel like of all of them, it's the most adult. In terms of the animation, it's a bit more flat in terms of its colors, and also the jokes. Some of the jokes are not adult themed, but they're like more aimed towards an adult would understand and find funny.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's also meant for children as well. And I think they did that because they were in a transition point between us as an audience and also the children at that time.
Yeah.
Because there'd been such a big gap between 2 and 3, and then 4 was aimed mainly at children again. And I think they're all very good films, but I found that quite interesting rewatching it and realizing that, especially like in number 3 when they all basically accept their death at one point and they're just about to go into like the massive furnace.
Yeah.
That's quite dark for a children's film.
It is kind of dark, yeah.
But yeah, 3 was a good film. I've written here that it was my least favorite of all of them, but I think I have to rethink that after watching it again.
Okay.
I'm not sure actually. That's a tough one. Other ones I've got is The Social Network.
Yeah, that was a very good movie.
Yeah,
I remember that's a movie again I actually remember seeing, and it's one that still sticks with me.
Yeah,
it was a very good movie.
I actually only saw that for the first time in 2019.
Oh really?
Yeah. It was always on my list, but you know when you have films that you just like
you
don't
just
get
end
around
up
to.
watching.
Yeah, but I just kind of forced myself. But I'm really glad I did because it's a really good film. And Shutter Island as well.
Yes, I haven't watched it, but I know what happens. As in, I've seen like an analysis of that movie.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a really underrated Martin Scorsese film. People don't really put it on the same pedestal that they put a lot of his other films on, which I can see why, but I do think it doesn't get enough praise or love as it deserves for some of the themes it talks about, the story, mental health, and just the effects trauma has on people, because he talks in the film he's a war veteran as well. Solid films. And also The Town, which is a kind of a smaller film, directed by Ben Affleck.
Okay.
And I mentioned it in our Wind River review.
Oh yes, I remember you mentioned it. Yeah.
That would be my honourable mention. What about you?
So for me, I would say so these would not be honourable mentions, but they're just like mentions of films which.
Are they dishonourable mentions?
No, neither are they dishonourable mentions. They're just kind of mentions of films which I thought were interesting at the time. So The King's Speech, I haven't actually watched it, but again, that was a film I remember that had a really big hype about it. I remember it was really heavily pushed, heavily popular. It seemed to have actually quite a big cultural impact, that film, that year. 127 Hours, I'd say the same.
Oh, have I not got that on here?
I think that came out in 2010.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And for me, that film again, although I wouldn't say it was a lasting film for me or anything like that, I think it had a big cultural impact at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Another film at the time which I did like, but again, I wouldn't say it was a honourable mention or anything like that, or that special in terms of culture, would be Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Have you seen that?
I haven't, and I need to watch it. Yeah. Basically, I haven't put any films on here that I haven't seen.
Oh, you haven't seen?
So
okay. Yeah.
That is one I would want to watch.
Yeah.
Because that's Edgar Wright is the director.
Yeah.
And he's done like Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, all those movies.
Yeah,
really good.
It's a very good movie. I think it's really funny. But yeah, that would be 2010 for me.
Okay. Start us off for 2011, Ramzan.
Okay, so I have to say, 2011, I didn't think it was a particularly great year for movies, if I'm honest.
I agree.
Which is a shame. And that was really interesting looking back at some of these these years. Is seeing which, actually, you don't realise, but some years that actually movies are not that great, in my view anyway. Yeah. So, again, for me, probably it would be the highest grossing movie of that year, which was Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 2. That's not because, again, again, I didn't think this movie was spectacularly good. I didn't think it was as good as, I think it's one of the worst Harry Potter movies.
Wow.
But I did think it was a solid movie still.
Did you prefer 1 to 2? Part 1 to part 2?
I haven't watched part 2 in a long time. I actually rewatched all the Harry Potters except part 2 because it was really hard to get hold of the. I got like a box set and then that DVD was missing. But anyway, so yeah, I haven't seen it in a while. But the reason I chose it is also because all the other films of the year were pretty bad. But overall, I think it was a really, really good ending. It was a strong, solid ending to a 10-year franchise. I really love the battle, for example, the Battle of Hogwarts. I love the battle between him and Voldemort. I love the twist where, Harry goes into the forest, you think he's been killed. The death of numerous characters, which was done in a very moving way. I think they ended it very nicely as well. So it was a very good movie. I don't think it's the best Harry Potter movie, but yeah, that would be my take on it.
It was a good, like you said, ending to a pretty phenomenal franchise.
Yeah,
and kind of summed things up quite nicely. Kind of like how Avengers Endgame did. It's not the best in the whole, all the Marvel movies up to that point, but as concluding that story, it did a very, very good job.
Yeah.
For me, just actually to go back quickly, I don't think this movie was terrible. I thought we were thinking of 2012, but I think there were less bangers than 2010, but there were more in the middle. 2010 I felt had a lot of flops and a lot of bangers. 2011 I think had a few more just kind of meh movies, or just that was decent. They weren't like really standout things. One standout for me though was Drive. Have you seen Drive?
No, I've heard of it though.
Yeah, for me this was kind of an introduction to a new genre in a way, of like I'd never watched noir films before, but this is kind of like neo-noir, where it's like new style of noir, where the kind of the aesthetic of the film and the vibe and the feel takes precedence over story.
Yeah.
The characters, plot. There's not much of a plot to this movie. There is, but it's not the focus, and that was a new experience for me. And it was. I think for me, I really liked the fact that this was my introduction to that film. It felt very, very. It's hyper stylized. It's extremely sleek, and everything works in service to that. So the soundtrack is extremely smooth. As I said, the visuals, there's like a lot of neon, that kind of thing. Is very moody, and that's also corroborated with Ryan Gosling's performance. He's this very stoic character who, in the whole film, I've got it written down, he says 891 words, and he's the lead of this film. It's like not even 1,000 words in the whole film, but he is his mannerisms and the way he carries himself that really makes his performance shine. Rather than anything that he has to say. I really enjoyed it. It was a very, very pretty movie. Basically, all the colors worked well, and one that you can rewatch. I think.
Okay.
You can rewatch a lot. There's a lot of even just like I don't know a lot, but I've seen a few video essays kind of analyzing the visuals of this film and how they shot different things and why it works. So yeah, I would say Drive. Recommend it.
Yeah, no, I might have to watch it now. So yeah.
Any mentions that you have?
Again, I kind of struggled with the mentions, to be honest. I put Rango, which I thought was a really good animated movie at the time, and Puss in Boots. I don't know if you've seen Puss in Boots.
No, I haven't.
No. So that was it was like it's basically like not sequel, but it's like a spin-off from Shrek. But Rango I really liked. I thought it was a really nice like Western style movie, but animated. I thought it was very inventive. Again, I thought the characters, I really liked the style of animation in the film. I liked some of the music used in the film. I thought it was very gripping, and again perfectly suited for both adults and children. So and I've actually watched it quite a lot of times because I really like Rango. So maybe that should have been. Actually, no. I probably wouldn't say it was the best movie, but it was high up there that year.
If you put Rango as your best movie of the year, I would not be happy. No. So for me, Deathly Hallows Part 2 is a mention. And so is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but again, I've heard of it. Yeah.
So that's David Fincher, and it's a pretty good film. I prefer the original Swedish version, but it's worth a watch. That was 50-50. Have you seen that?
No.
No, that's Seth Rogen and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, as you mentioned before, where he's like a cancer patient, and it's kind of like a feel-good comedy type movie.
Okay.
It was okay. I remember seeing it in cinema. I think there's nothing else on, and I remember it. There's that. And another one, we need to talk about Kevin. Have you heard of this movie?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I can't remember what it's about.
So it's about this boy who, I mean, I've watched like, I don't think I've seen the whole film in its entirety. I've seen like the second, you know, when you used to scroll through TV and you'd see something is on and then you like watch it from wherever it was.
Yeah.
I think my mum was watching it and I just watched it with her. But that like second 2/3 of the movie was really, really like powerful, even at that age when I was watching it, 12, 13. But it's about this boy who's quite strange. He's a bit peculiar. He does really weird things. And he goes on to like become a school shooter, basically.
Yeah. I definitely know of that film.
Yeah, and he kills his father and his brother as well, and he's not really with it. And it's about you're more following his mother and how she has to deal with this, and her kind of feelings around it, and how she, even despite he's done this, it's still her son at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's got Tilda Swinton, I think, who plays the lead, and she did a really, really amazing job with that performance. Other ones that I have are Limitless and Source Code.
Okay.
Have you seen those?
I think I've seen Limitless. I haven't seen Source Code.
Yeah, again, like decent movies. And then also lastly, The Tree of Life.
Oh yeah, which I still haven't watched.
Yeah. Which I saw this like in 2019.
Yeah.
And it's just a very surreal, abstract kind of artsy movie. But again, a good watch. A lot of people would probably think that is movie of the year.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
People, that I think they'd go for that.
Sure. Cool. So do you want us to take us into 2012?
I can do. I'll transport us back to 2012. So 2012, I think we're probably going to actually have an agreement on this. I'm not sure. I'm not going to spoil yours, but for me, it's Django Unchained.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So Django Unchained. I mean, I think it's not my favorite Tarantino movie. It's my favorite is I've forgotten the name. Reservoir Dogs. My favorite is Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, you said.
But it's my second most enjoyable, if that makes sense.
Django Unchained.
Yeah. So my most enjoyable is Kill Bill.
Mm.
This is my second most enjoyable. Meaning when I watch it, I'm really in enjoyment of what I'm seeing. It's not necessarily the most memorable, but when I'm in the moment, I'm loving it basically.
Yeah.
And it's got my favorite last or third act of any Tarantino movie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So literally from the moment where Christoph Waltz kills
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Candy.
Yeah, Candy.
Yeah. That from then onwards is like it's glorious.
Mad.
Yeah.
It is.
I was talking about it before. There's one point where there's like a snap zoom out from Django, and he pulls the gun out of the other guy's jacket and shoots him.
Oh yeah. And honestly, in this movie, Leonardo DiCaprio's performance is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, he's stellar.
I feel like especially the scene, where they're all having dinner. That scene is absolutely mad. Like, I think it's a really, really good movie. Yeah, and I think we've discussed this before about how it's a movie that appeals. I think it's the one that's most appealing to a broader audience. It's not like his. It's not a movie which is more niche. People. It's not more of a niche movie where particular type of people like it, such as Pulp Fiction, such as Reservoir Dogs, such as maybe Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah, but what else is there anything else you want?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, and especially with the point about DiCaprio's performance. Like he really just ate that performance, and you just hate him as a character, which is hard for DiCaprio, I think, because he's quite generally plays kind of like the good guy or the lovable guy.
Yeah,
but you despise him. And same with Samuel Jackson, him in that role. I think generally everyone did a really, really good job. But yeah, Tarantino in general does his villains really well, I feel.
Yeah, he does.
There's Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards. generally his villains are pretty damn on point.
Yeah, Hateful Eight as well. I think the villains in that, although quite a lot of them are villains.
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
Yeah, was really good as well. So yeah, that was definitely a really good movie.
Yeah. Any other? I don't think there's anything else I have to say about that. I've got some mentions.
Yep.
Do you have mentions?
Yeah, my mentions would be Skyfall. I really like Skyfall. I thought that I haven't watched very many James Bond movies. Very little. It was actually the first James Bond movie I've actually watched. And I really liked it. I thought it was a really, really good movie. And another film would be Wreck-It Ralph. Have you seen Wreck-It Ralph?
I think so. I think I've seen it in bits. I don't know if I've seen the whole thing beginning to end.
Yeah, so it's one of my, not my favourite, but it's probably in my top 10 favourite animated films. So yeah.
Fair enough. I've heard good things about it, and I enjoyed what I've seen of it. My mentions would be Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. I thought you'd say that.
Yeah, it's not as good as the predecessors, but it's decent. It's like what you said, where it kind of, I guess, in a way, sums up that story and concludes it, kind of. Also, Avengers.
Oh yeah, Avengers came out that year.
So Avengers
it was the highest grossing film that year.
Yeah, and that was, I guess you could say, in a way, the starting point of what was to follow.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to look back at this decade, the most memorable thing of this decade would be Marvel. They pretty much dominated. So
especially the latter part of the decade.
Yeah.
Pretty much every film every year, the highest grossing film is a Marvel film.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what I think the 2010s will probably be remembered for, if anything, by the majority of people. And they kind of set a precedence in terms of what they're doing. I've mentioned Life of Pi here. I don't know why. I didn't really like it that much. But I guess it's worth mentioning because it was such a, like you said, culturally it had a big impact, or socially it had a big impact at the time.
And another film actually that had a big impact, Hunger Games, came out that year.
Oh, God damn.
You don't like Hunger Games?
No.
I liked the first Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Didn't you like the first Hunger Games?
I don't know if I've watched the whole thing, but I didn't like those movies in general. They just, for the genre of battle royale movies, I think there's way better ones.
Really?
Yeah. So Battle Royale, which is a movie, which is, I think it's Japanese.
I haven't even heard of it.
Yeah, it's a really good. I think it's one of Tarantino's favorite movies.
Yeah.
And it does that. I think that it's a much more enjoyable movie of like battle royale. I'm not going to say much more, but yeah, I recommend it a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Hunger Games, I would say for that year, I liked the movie, but I think more in terms of its, again, cultural impact, it was huge. I think it had a massive fan base.
But you could say things like, because you're going to hate me for saying this, but I put Hunger Games on the same level as Twilight.
Really?
Yeah. And
okay,
they both have a big cultural impact, but were they good movies? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. No, I understand. I think perhaps with Hunger Games, I'm just harking back more to how I felt at the time when, it was more just, oh, wow, like me and my friends going to the cinema and stuff like that. It was, but I mean, definitely the other Hunger Games movies I thought were not very good. So potentially, the first one was not that good either. But I thought it was all right.
Fair enough.
But yeah.
But yeah, again, it kind of like you said, mentioned like long-lasting effect. I don't think Hunger Games people remember it. I don't think it's had any lasting effects into where movies are right now.
No, I would agree. I think it was culturally relevant at the time.
Yeah.
But not now.
No. Another one was End of Watch and Chronicle. Have you seen those movies?
No.
They're kind of more. They were two like found footage films, which don't seem to get made much anymore. Not that I've seen. Not found footage, but like camera footage where it's a person holding the camera.
Yeah, like Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, like Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity. And they were both really good. They had solid performances. It's an early performance, I think, for Michael B. Jordan. One of his first films. Obviously, he went on to become huge. So I think this kind of helped with that. And then lastly, I've got Looper, which is.
I've seen
film.
Looper. Yeah,
not lastly. I've got a few more.
I thought Looper was Not that good.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I like, again, the idea, but I remember leaving the cinema, even at whatever I was, 16, 15, just feeling a bit underwhelmed by it, but especially the ending. And again, it was a movie where I remembered I thought the characters were not that good.
Fair enough. Yeah, I, again, haven't seen it in a while, and
You haven't even written anything for it, so
No.
maybe it's not that as good as you remember.
mentions. These are mentions.
Okay,
That's not an honorable mention. It's just a mention.
just to mention.
And then I've got 21 Jump Street, which for me I think is one of the best comedies of the decade.
Yeah, I don't think I've even seen 21 Jump Street.
Really?
Yeah.
No, it's
I have to watch it.
It's one of those films that I think it's still, comedy kind of, and most genres actually, they can have passing fads or phases. I think this one will always, or at least for now, is generally going to be funny for a long time.
Yeah, and it's still culturally relevant, I would say. There's still a lot, the second one came out not too long ago, I believe. And it's still something which I feel is on people's mouths or in people's memory. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'd recommend. And A Cabin in the Woods. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I know the plot already.
Yeah.
I know the story.
Yeah. So I guess it's a spin on that typical horror genre, which was obviously done to death. So it's something a bit different and a bit more interesting.